Hi, it's been a while, but we are back with the first part of year 7 to 8 for SplashClan. As I mentioned in the last video, there are just so many cats that I had to split up the video into 2 parts for my own sanity, and this part will be purely focused on the cats who died. That's right, this entire video is just the dead ones. Buckle up, a lot of cats died in these years, and it only gets worse from here, you guys. Only 2 months into year 7 was when the first of 2 mass extinction events happened. 7 of SplashClan's cats died as a result of the fish in the river and ocean becoming poisoned from 2-leg trash. Since this event only happened 2 months into year 7, there really isn't much I can say about some of these cats. One little warning though, I drew these guys a bit differently than I did for the last few SplashClan videos. I instead am testing out Procreate, and I ran into a bit of a problem. As I colored the designs, I turned off the background, making the artwork transparent, and turns out the recordings don't become transparent too. So I have ended up with recordings with completely black backgrounds. Well, now I know not to turn the background layer off until after the art is done, but anyways, let's get into the cats. The first cat to die from the mass poisoning was Clovefreckle, the oldest of Lightgale and Jade Zinnia's first litter of kits. Where we had left off, he was dealing with the massive loss of his father Jade Zinnia, as well as 2 of his kits, Bushpaw and Quietpaw, and this has resulted in him developing constant nightmares as a result. To calm himself down, he had been hoping to receive Patchouliprickle as his first apprentice, however, to his and everyone else's shock, Gannetstar apprenticed her son Patchouliprickle to themselves, and refused to change their mind on the matter, even though many in the clan had their eyes on mentoring him, and Gannetstar had already proven herself a bad mentor, with Sagepeak and Quietpaw having both died as a result of her poor mentoring. Shortly after this, however, his nightmares thankfully stopped, but he was one of the cats who ate the poisoned fish and died. The next cat who died is Clovefreckle's slightly younger littermate, Downface, meaning that Lightgale and Jade Zinnia's first litter of kits have sadly all died now. For nearly Downface's entire time as a warrior, she had been working as hard as she could to prove her worth as a warrior, and maybe even become a deputy someday. She knew that there were others better than her and stronger than her, but in the end, if all she got out of her work was that she was remembered as a strong, reliable warrior, she would be pleased. Similarly to her brother, Clovefreckle, she had her eyes on mentoring Patchouliprickle and adored him, and was devastated when Gannetstar decided to mentor him. She felt really down as a result of her loss, but thankfully she was able to recover from the grief of having lost her father, Jade Zinnia, but it was later that same month when she died from eating the poisoned fish. The next cat who died in the mass extinction event was the last living of Thunder Isle's first litter of kits, Curlrise. Fairly recently, Curlrise had dealt with the loss of their 2 litter mates, Speckle and Bowdon, and although by the time we started year 7 they had moved on from their grief, they could never be the same without them, even if they had their adoptive siblings, Stonescreech and Whitestrike, around them. To try and cope and get through the harsh leaf pair they were in, Curlrise had begun to sneak off and eat kitty pet food from the local 2-legs, and thankfully this was undetected by their clanmates. Unfortunately though, early in year 7, Curlrise disappeared for a few days and returned wearing a black collar and was forced to explain what had happened. They felt an immense amount of shame, and due to their strong faith in StarClan as well as the warrior code, they wondered if somehow the clan would be punished for their mistake. When cats in the clan began to get sick from the poisoned fish, Curlrise believed that this was their own fault, and that this was StarClan's punishment for them breaking the warrior code. Next is Shadetide, the daughter of the former kitty pet Jumbledapple. Not much happened with her, but in the last few months of her life, she was wanting to get to know old Deuteronomy Plume better, and I have a good idea for why that is. Shadetide and her mother, Jumbledapple, have both felt out of place in the clan since everyone knows each other, and most of the cats were either clan founders, born into the clan, or were taken in as kits. Jumbledapple was the first new cat to join, and as a result, she and Shadetide never felt like they belonged. Though Crunchwrap later showed up, she was an elder, and neither Shadetide or Jumbledapple knew her very well. This was until old Deuteronomy Plume showed up, an intelligent, skilled, and fierce cat who seemed to fit right into clan life upon her arrival, but regardless of the difference they had, they were still both outsiders in SplashClan, and Shadetide really thought that they could potentially get along and become friends. The next cat who died is, sadly, Algaefreckle, another one of Lightgale and Jade Zinnia's kits. Algaefreckle was a young warrior who was just trying to find her place in the clan. Although she was a skilled camp keeper, she was worried that her role and skills weren't good enough for her clanmates. She wasn't that great of a fighter or hunter, and she wondered if her clanmates looked down on her for that, as well as her strange and awkward demeanor, and developed some anxiety around her clanmates due to her fear of them judging or looking down on her. The next cat who died was Scorchpaw, one of Clovefreckle's kits. Unfortunately, even though he was 15 months old when he died, he never received his warrior name, although that would have been Scorchseeker, which is one of the coolest names I've seen ClanGen generate in a while. Though Scorchpaw had a big interest in clan politics, he spent a lot of his time by the nursery playing with the kits, and as a result, in the final months of his life, he thought about how nice it would be to someday have a mate and kits of his own, but unfortunately, he never got to have that. This next cat might make some of you guys a little sad, but Rippleheart is the next cat who died. Last year, she had suffered a broken jaw right before she was supposed to become a warrior. Though Gannetstar ended up giving her a warrior name anyway, she had been attempting to recover for 4 months when she finally did recover. Rippleheart was so excited to finally experience the life of a warrior and prove in her mind that she didn't receive her warrior name as a courtesy, but she had actually proved her worth. A month after this, however, Rippleheart became the last cat to die from the mass poisoning. Though no more cats died from the poisoning, there was one more cat who died the same month they did. Unfortunately, Pumpkinkit died as well. Though the medicine cats fought hard to cure her green cough, her sickness only got worse and worse and ended up progressing into yellow cough. Lightgale, Thornheart, and Brasilbramble worked as hard as they possibly could to save her, but as her condition worsened and worsened, the medicine cats were under an immense amount of stress, with the 7 poisoned cats being in the medicine den as well. Thornheart was tasked with caring for her, but in the end, the herbs they gave her didn't work, and she died the same month she would have become an apprentice. To make things even sadder, either Pumpkinkit died after Hootheart and Poolpaw were apprenticed, meaning she had to watch her littermates become apprentices without her, or she died before they all became apprentices, meaning that Hootheart and Poolpaw became apprentices knowing that their sister wasn't with them. The game would have given Pumpkinkit the warrior name Pumpkin Blaze, which is a pretty fun name, although I probably wouldn't have passed up the opportunity to rename her Pumpkin Patch. It just felt so perfect. To make things even sadder, the next cat to die was Poolpaw. Poolpaw was apprenticed to Jumbledapple. As a result of losing her sister so young and her already having an antagonistic personality, Poolpaw became cold and distant towards her clanmates, but still had an intense drive to be a great warrior, wanting more than anything for her warrior name to end in Claw. Though as time passed, she began to mellow out a little bit, even thinking about how nice it would be to have a mate and kits of her own someday. However, just as things started to look up for her, she was killed by a dog while out on patrol with her mentor Jumbledapple, making this the second apprentice of Jumbledapple's she's witnessed the death of while on a patrol. Now we're moving on to the second mass extinction event. This one is really weird, and I still don't know exactly what happened here. One night, a very large chunk of the clan just disappeared into the night without a trace. The cats all ended up in StarClan, but where did they go? Were they taken by Two Legs? And if they were, why weren't there any signs of a struggle? And why weren't any of the other cats woken up? The whole thing is incredibly strange and bizarre, which has only made the stress the SplashClan cats were already under much worse, and many cats believe this was somehow a punishment from StarClan. The first of the cats who died was Brasilbramble, the new medicine cat who had just recently joined the clan. After having been in the clan for only 2 months, she endured the mass poisoning the clan underwent, which left her feeling incredibly shaken up, not realizing how dire things in clan life could really be. Though she thankfully was able to pick herself back up with the help and comfort of Lightgale, and was back to being the cold and grumpy cat she was known for being. And the rest of the time she served as a SplashClan medicine cat, she did her job really well, but wouldn't at all hold back from being grumpy and snarky towards her patients. In the end, she was among the many cats who disappeared into the night. And to make Brasilbramble's death even sadder, Lightgale was the next of the cats who disappeared. Early on during this time, he dealt with the deaths of his kits, Clovefreckle, Downface, and Algaefreckle from the mass poisoning. Though he was devastated by all of his kits' deaths, Downface's death hit him the hardest. He truly believed she had a bright future ahead of her, and now she'll never be able to achieve any of her dreams. The only thing to pull him out of his grief was the realization that he wasn't the only cat who lost someone from the poisoning. Thunder Isle lost Curlrise, the last living kit from her first litter, and she was just as heartbroken and devastated. Together, they were able to recover from their grief. It was after that when he realized it might be healthy for him to potentially move on from Jade Zinnia, to accept love from someone else if he ever found it. In the end, however, he died before he was able to do so, and was able to reunite with Jade Zinnia, Clovefreckle, Downface, Gorgeflight, and Algaefreckle in StarClan. Next is sadly Weedspeckle. Early on, she was entirely delighted by how slow time seemed to move while she was caring for Nutkit, Brokenkit, and Icekit in the nursery. The same month the mass poisoning happened was when Lightgale and Thornpaw found 5 kits in the territory and brought them back to camp. Weedspeckle, being the only cat that could nurse them, began to care for them, and the kits were named Dropkit, Flitkit, Sardinekit, Hyacinthkit, and Emberkit. Almost immediately, she noticed there was something a tad off about these kits, but she wasn't able to ever figure it out. Unbeknownst to Weedspeckle, though, the kit's father, a rogue named Finian, had a connection with the dark forest that he had passed on to his kits, most prominently Dropkit. I am very certain this won't cause any problems at all, and will definitely not lead into the next overarching story I have planned for SplashClan. Anyways, once her kits were apprenticed, she continued to take things slow, having gotten used to the pace she had set for herself. Overall, she was the happiest and most content with life she had ever been, but it was only 3 months after that when she disappeared along with many of the cats in the clan. Next is Jumbledapple. She was able to fully recover from her green cough and out of thanks ended up helping the medicine cats gather herbs in the territory. It was only a month after that when her daughter, Shadetide, died as a result of eating the poisoned prey. She was devastated by the loss, and she avoided giving into the grief too much, and hardly any cat noticed how upset she really was. It was around this time too that she felt comfortable enough to take another apprentice after her first apprentice, Bushpaw, died on her first patrol outside of camp. She was given Poolpaw, and the two were able to get along pretty well, thanks to them both having colder personalities. Things seemed to be going well when one day, while out patrolling the border with Poolpaw, they were attacked by a dog and Poolpaw was unable to get away in time. Brackenshade noticed her unease growing and decided that the only way she was going to be able to get through this was to successfully train an apprentice, no matter how scared she was of something bad happening, and she was given Droppaw. However, it was shortly after that when she was among the cats who disappeared. Stonescreech is the next cat who disappeared. He was able to recover from the bout of white cough he had and got back out to his warrior duties quickly. It was around this time when he began to start working harder than he ever had before to try and achieve his goal of someday becoming deputy. It was around this time when he actually discovered something he wasn't supposed to discover. Snapfern, for quite some time, had been tasked with spying on specifically chosen cats of SplashClan who Gannetstar deemed to be untrustworthy or a threat. Among these cats was Stonescreech's mother, Thunder Isle. He knew that this was wrong, and so he began to do some sneaking around himself to try and get closer to Snapfern, wondering why she was doing this for Gannetstar, and why Thunder Isle was one of the cats she was spying on. As time passed, Stonescreech grew resentful of Snapfern, and it seemed he was the only cat in the clan who had realized Snapfern was turning around and telling Gannetstar everything she learned about her clanmates. In the end, however, Stonescreech disappeared and went to StarClan. The next cat who died is sadly Tidalwave, meaning that Thornheart is the last living of Lightgale and Jade Zinnia's kits. Early in the year, she was still an apprentice and hoped that she would be recognized for her skill in fighting by being named Tidalclaw. 2 months into the year, however, is when her sister, Algaefreckle, died from eating poisoned fish. She was completely and utterly devastated by the loss, and wondered how she was supposed to go on without her. Algaefreckle was odd, sure, but she was still her sister, and she provided a lot of comfort that once she was gone, Tidalpaw realized she desperately needed. She did her best to try and pick herself up, not allowing her grief to drag her down too much, and promised that she would do her best for Algaefreckle's sake. Brackenshade took over her apprenticeship after her original mentor, Downface, died in the mass poisoning alongside Algaefreckle. Strangely enough, though, in just the 2 months Brackenshade served as her mentor, she learned a lot more from him than she'd ever did from Downface. She learned how to avoid unnecessary conflict and even learned how to better climb and run from him. Though Downface did teach her a valuable lesson in learning how to bend the rules a little. Tidalwave became a warrior 2 months after the poisoning, and she was honored for her observance and wished her past mentor, Downface, could have been there to see her become a warrior. A month later, Tidalwave recovered from Algaefreckle's death, and a few months later was among the cats who disappeared. The cat next is, sadly, Patchouliprickle, who you will all remember as Patchoulikit. The first month into the year, Patchoulipaw was apprenticed to none other than his parent, Gannetstar. The clan was furious about this decision and begged Gannetstar to give Patchouliprickle to any other warrior to train, but Gannetstar refused, wanting to mentor their own son. After having not received enough attention from his parents as a kid, Patchouliprickle grew into a grumpy and snarky apprentice, losing his playful and sweet demeanor he had as a kid that made so many warriors want to be his mentor. Early on in his apprenticeship, Gannetstar praised him anytime he acted impulsively, picked fights, and did tasks in a violent manner, and as a result, he began to develop a similar bloodthirsty nature just like Gannetstar. Very similarly to Gannetstar's past litter of kits, Patchouliprickle was made a warrior earlier than he should have been, being 11 months old at the time, and he was honored for his dignity. That very same month, he was also given his very first apprentice, that being Brackenshade and Weedspeckle's daughter Nutpaw, who he began to heavily influence in the same ways Gannetstar had done to him. Patchouliprickle began to disappear often, although no one really knew where he was running off to. In the end, he was among the cats who disappeared, and he went to StarClan. I'm sure if Patchouliprickle had lived any longer though, he likely would have gone to the Dark Forest. Patchouliprickle had been raised to take after Gannetstar's violent nature, and I'm sure he just would have needed a bit more time to really do something terrible. But thankfully, I think now that he's in StarClan, he values his place there more than he does his bloodthirsty nature. Nutpaw is sadly the next cat who died, but you'll all remember her as Nutkit from the last video. Nutkit was the firstborn of Weedspeckle and Brackenshade's kits, and she was easily the most fierce, impulsive, and aggressive of her littermates, to the point that many cats were unsure where she was getting this from. When she was 6 months old, she was apprenticed to Patchouliprickle and almost immediately developed a bloodthirsty personality, just like he had from his mentor Gannetstar. From then on, Nutpaw began picking fights with the other apprentices and pestered her mentor for more and more battle training, even after she caught Greencough. Sadly though, at only 9 months old, Nutpaw was a casualty in SplashClan's mass disappearance. To make Nutpaw's death even more sad, her brother, Brokenpaw, was the next of the cats who disappeared. From a young age, he really admired his father Brackenshade's role as deputy, and wanted to someday do the job himself, and so he took on a bossy and strict personality. On top of that, he began to do anything and everything he could to receive praise and admiration from his clanmates. When he was 6 months old, he was apprenticed to Sparkstep and began training harder than his littermates. Unfortunately, a month into his apprenticeship, he was attacked by a dog and his tail was badly injured, and as the months went on, he grew more and more restless in the den, even sneaking out to train with Nutpaw, who was sick with Greencough, which resulted in his tail injury becoming infected. Later that same month, he was among the cats who disappeared. The next cat who disappeared is a new addition to the clan, Hyacinthpaw. A month into year 7, Lakegale and Thornpaw were out collecting herbs when they discovered something tragic: the dead body of a cat named Finian alongside his 5 newborn kits. They were immediately taken back to camp, where they were nursed back to health and named Dropkit, Flitkit, Sardinekit, Hyacinthkit, and Emberkit. Weedspeckle took them in to take care of, and so they grew up alongside her own kits, Nutkit, Brokenkit, and Icekit. Hyacinthkit was always the sweetest and most compassionate of his littermates, but was just as playful and active. Early on, he even noticed Nutkit becoming more and more antagonistic, worried that somehow she would get worse and worse as she got older. Eventually, Hyacinthpaw was apprenticed to none other than Weedspeckle, and promised to work as hard as he possibly could to be a good warrior. Sadly, Hyacinthpaw was among the cats who disappeared. Another sad death from the mass disappearance is Snapfern. Going back to what I had mentioned earlier with Stonescreech, Snapfern had been tasked with spying on the cats of SplashClan and reporting her findings back to Gannetstar, and this had been going on as far back as year 2. Snapfern's main issue she's had is she doesn't feel like she belongs in the clan, and she desperately wanted to have a purpose, and in the end, Gannetstar gave her one. Early in year 7 was when Patchouliprickle was apprenticed, and initially she was relieved at the amount of warriors who were willing to train him. However, it was Gannetstar herself who decided to mentor their son. Snapfern was unable to say anything to try and stop Gannetstar, as she knew they weren't going to budge, but she was terrified of what was going to happen to Patchouliprickle. As a result of her stress, Snapfern retired to the Elder's Den, a decision that angered Gannetstar, but they didn't stop her. As time went on, she realized how unsatisfied she was with her life and all the mistakes she had made. Snapfern had chosen Gannetstar when Lightspots was there the whole time. He loved her and adored her so much, and yet she ignored him for Gannetstar, and now it was too late. It was only 3 months after Patchouliprickle became a warrior when Snapfern disappeared alongside many of the clan's cats and went to StarClan, having redeemed herself in the end even after having betrayed her clanmates for Gannetstar by recognizing her mistakes. Although Snapfern was the last of the cats who disappeared, there were still 3 more cats who died this year afterwards, the first of which is Hootheart, the last of Lightspot's litter of kits, who you will all remember as Hootkit from the last video. Early in year 7, Hootpaw was apprenticed to Thunder Isle, and her mentor immediately realized that they had very, very little in common. Hootpaw was a sweet cat, but she was incredibly oblivious to her surroundings. However, she had an immense skill for being able to perfectly memorize clan history. As they got through training, it became clear that the reason for her oblivious nature was a result of her having lost her littermates, Pumpkinkit and Poolpaw, incredibly young, becoming more distracted as a result of the loss. Even though she and Thunder Isle had little in common, Hootpaw still vowed to do her best and was able to get through her training pretty easily. Eventually, Hootheart became a warrior and was honored for her determination, and was named as the clan's official lore keeper, having been recommended for the position by her mentor Thunder Isle. Though they didn't have much of a relationship, Thunder Isle still influenced Hootheart to not be afraid to stand up for herself and use her claws sometimes, and taught her to not be immediately friendly to everyone they meet. Later that same month, the SplashClan mass disappearance happened and Jumbledapple was among the cats who died, leaving her apprentice Droppaw without a mentor. Brackenshade elected Hootheart to continue her apprenticeship, trusting her even though she was a brand new warrior. Eventually, Dropson became a warrior and Hootheart felt incredibly accomplished, feeling like she was now able to fit in with the older warriors. A few months later, Brackenshade sent Jellyfishspeckle and Hootheart out on a patrol and dark storm clouds formed up ahead. Hootheart, feeling like she had a say in what they should do, decided they should keep going, but Jellyfishspeckle, being the more experienced warrior, saw how bad of an idea it was and suggested they turn back, but Hootheart didn't listen. In the end, a flood occurred and Hootheart was swept away, drowning in the process. The next cat who died was Icestripe, meaning that just like Lightspot's, all of Brackenshade's kits died in the last 2 years as well. As a young kit, Icekit was definitely the most similar to both her parents, deciding to wear cardinal feathers in her fur to mimic Brackenshade and even inherited Weedspeckle's connection to StarClan. When she was older, she was apprenticed to Lightspots and was pretty jealous that her sister Nutpaw got Patchouliprickle as a mentor, who Icepaw thought was just so cool. As a result, Icepaw became bloodthirsty just like Nutpaw did and even started fights with the other apprentices. Later in her apprenticeship, the mass disappearance occurred, which resulted in the death of her mother, Weedspeckle, alongside her littermates, Nutpaw and Brokenpaw. This loss affected Icestripe a lot, which led to her realizing how terribly she had been acting, even growing to appreciate her mentor Lightspots. Icestripe was later made a warrior and she was honored for her cunning, now being a fierce warrior for her strong connection to StarClan, who just so happens to be a pretty good storyteller. The same month as Hootheart's death, Icestripe went out on a patrol with Sparkstep and the two were attacked by a dog on the Haze Clan border, resulting in Icestripe's death. And that was all the cats in StarClan, but that's not the end of the video. There is one more cat who died this year, that being Gannetstar. They died in between the mass disappearance and Hootheart and Icestripe's death, but I thought I'd save her till the end because things are going to get very interesting with them. As mentioned before, Gannetstar gave themselves their son, Patchouliprickle, as an apprentice early in year 7, and throughout his apprenticeship, she taught him to be more violent and aggressive, influencing him to inherit her bloodthirsty nature. After Patchouliprickle became a warrior, she was attacked by a dog, which led to them being in the medicine den for months recovering from their injury. While she was there, the mass disappearance happened, and this, of course, only made her broken mental state worse, with the loss of Snapfern and Patchouliprickle as well as the death of Lightgale, one of the few cats they really trusted. Months later, and Gannetstar lost their first life as a result of the injury they received from the dog attack and later decided to move on from Snapfern. As time passed, Gannetstar grew more and more aggressive and paranoid, and ended up losing her second life from a venomous snakebite. It was then when over the course of a month, Gannetstar began to deteriorate, both physically and mentally, and began to slowly lose all of their lives as a result of old age. Just a few months before Gannetstar's death, Brackenshade decided to retire from his position as deputy and became an elder early, which infuriated Gannetstar. For his replacement, Gannetstar chose Lightspots, primarily because of the fact that he was the oldest warrior in the clan and was just about to retire, and 2, this wasn't a position or role he wanted at all. In the end, Gannetstar died, telling Lightspots she's pleased with him of all cats being cursed to be a leader like they were. Gannetstar was the first SplashClan cat to go to the Dark Forest after death, but their story doesn't stop there. Far from it. After all, there is currently a cat in SplashClan with a strong connection to the Dark Forest, and once she reaches out to her, they can reach out to nearly anyone they want. To Gannetstar, the clans were a mistake. After having led SplashClan for a good portion of their life, she holds a large amount of disdain towards them and will do anything to destroy them. And that's the end of the StarClan and Dark Forest section of SplashClan years 7 and 8. This was a lot of cats, but I had a lot of fun drawing them, and I know for a fact that I'm going to have even more fun getting to draw the living cats for this video. The clan underwent a lot of changes, both good and bad, and I can't wait to draw all of them. One last thing before this video ends, I have mentioned this on my community tab and in my last video, but it felt appropriate to mention it here as well. There is a SplashClan Tumblr blog up and running. There I have posted full character bios with higher resolution character references, full family trees, detailed character bios and histories, along with some little fun facts that I wasn't able to fit into the normal videos. On top of that, I take little character requests, and I've decided to even turn the blog into an ask blog as well. So if you want to ask the SplashClan characters anything, feel free to send an ask. The link to the blog will be in the description.